Good evening, my friends, and welcome to Spooky True Saturdays for all your true and supposedly true paranormal, close encounter, and otherwise bizarre story needs. Tonight, we learn the hazards of excessive drinking through an anecdote featuring one of my great-uncles. Don't worry, this one has a happy ending. So gather round and listen well to Elmer's last drink. For the sake of this story, as with most other stories I've told, the names have been changed for privacy reasons. Great Uncle Elmer loved to drink, perhaps too much so. At least, that's how it was for the longest time. However, a few years ago, somehow, some way, Great Uncle Elmer decided that there was no way he was going to be able to keep going the way he was doing. So, he actively started to wean himself off the drink. Well, one morning, he woke up early from a night of heavy drinking and found himself, like on many other Monday mornings, stricken by a hangover. Hangovers, Elmer learned, were never fun, but they only got harder to deal with as he got older. He knew that all the booze he had been guzzling was eventually going to do more harm than that, and such thoughts plagued his mind that morning between the usual battering-ram-type pains of a hangover headache. He decided that he would just leave early and take the scenic route to work. If he did that, he could roll down the car windows and let the brisk pre-dawn air help soothe his aching head and rouse him fully awake. Now, Elmer lived way out in the country. While there were several routes he could have taken to reach town, all of them were long, winding paths that snaked over and around a labyrinth of hills, cutting through hayfields and woodlands for miles on end. It wasn't until very recently that most of these routes were half-paved, and it was actually within my lifetime that some of them even received actual street names besides rural route such and such. Because this was the backwoods of the Appalachians, you'd better believe you couldn't go more than a few miles near civilization without running across a church. Almost always, you will also find a graveyard within spitting distance of said church. The route Elmer took that morning was no different. This one particular church was most often accessed by going up a steep gravel road, through some woodland and back out onto a hill. The graveyard attached to it stretched for a very long ways. In fact, there were a few pockets of mini-cemeteries that extended almost down to the road, so you could see some of their tombstones atop this sort of cliffside overhanging the road. Mind you, at this point, Elmer had been on the road for about 20 minutes. The ride had been very quiet, with nothing but the hum of his car's motor and the rush of wind as the little vehicle puttered along. The sun was only just beginning to rise, causing the usual morning fog to cast everything in an eerie, smoky glow, and leaving the frost glinting on every available surface, making the world seem as though it had suddenly become a kingdom of crystals overnight. Everything was just so wonderfully peaceful. Until Great Uncle Elmer turned the corner leading him toward the cemetery-bearing cliff. As his car rounded the bend, Elmer could see that, up ahead, something pale was standing in the distant fog. The closer he drove toward it, the more prominent the figure became, and Elmer could see that it was sort of swaying. It looked as though the long-sleeved arm of a person was waving to him. Finally, he reached a point in the road where the fog abated, and he was able to see the figure clearly. There, perched high upon the cliffside, standing directly between two large tombstones, was a tall, humanoid figure. He could make out no face or discernible features, only that the shape was very obviously human. It was a brilliant white, from head to toe, even more so due to how well white shows up in the dim dawn light. There, he could see the vague fluttering of an arm draped in a long white sleeve, still waving at him like before, as if beckoning him toward the graves. That morning, Elmer made it to work taking the scenic route in record time. Now, you might think this is the end of the story, right? Well, while Elmer isn't the most adventurous soul, he just had to know what it was he saw. Surely there had to be a logical explanation for it, not the angel of death trying to say his drinking would soon land him in a new accommodations with some rather silent neighbors. That's why he got a couple of people to go with him to inspect it, including another of my great-uncles, Josiah, who you all might remember from the Panther story. That afternoon, Elmer and his crew drove up to the church from another road, parked in the lot, and then walked through the nearby woodland to investigate the site in question. They all walked out together, no one really taking the lead because not a single one of them wanted to tangle with a real ghost. As they neared the cliff, Elmer's breath caught in his throat, and he froze. There, near the edge of the cliff, was the figure in white. It was still waving. He almost turned and ran, but then he noticed the figure didn't seem to react. In fact, it wasn't exactly waving either. It slowly dawned on Elmer that what he was seeing was definitely not a ghost. Instead, what he was actually seeing was a cheap tarp that had been tossed over one of the mortuary statues and had loosely been secured so that the wind was able to billow up under it. The whole terrifying experience had, in fact, likely been the result of some teenager's prank. In the end, Elmer and his buddies got a good laugh out of the whole thing. Even though he had fallen for an absolutely ridiculous prank, the scare he got from it was enough to cut out the remaining alcohol he normally drank. And to my knowledge, he's now in his second year of sobriety. All thanks to the ghost that wasn't. Well, my friends, I hope you all enjoyed this story. I hadn't told a funny spooky story that turned out to be not so spooky in a while, so I figured I was well overdue. Hope you all had fun listening. If you don't want to wait until Wednesday for the next spooky story on here, then go check out my now revived channel, Mountain Ice Narrations. I started posting creepypastas again, and I'll have another one up on Monday. Also, if you're feeling generous, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/phantasmalpoppy. If anyone has suggestions they want me to read or types of stories they want to hear, then tell me in the comments below. Good night, and see you all real soon.